it's been lovely to be able to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day in person yet again this year, having sadly obviously had to do it online last year. And we've had some amazing speakers, guest speakers, Natalie Cumming, and also a lovely 96-year-old gentleman who was on the Kindertransport coming out of Cologne and actually lost all of his family. It's really been a very fitting tribute, I think, to all those who've died, not only in the Holocaust, but all those who've died in the various genocides since then, and obviously the persecution and genocides that we think of now that are currently taking place around the world.
I came here before the war. I came with the Kindertransport. That's it, I was one of the lucky ones. My parents were deported to Maly Trostenets. They were murdered there. And I'm the lucky one. I came here, fortunately. We were going to America. My parents were coming here. Then war broke out. They were in Germany. I was here. And then we never saw each other again, which is not an unusual story. It's happened many times. And I'm still lucky I'm still here. We were in London. I was in a hostel. Was supported by the Jewish community. And then a few months later, of course, war broke out. And we were evacuated to Bedford. And that was, I still remember it vividly, walking through the town, hundreds of kids, and then knocking on doors. And people took in 2 or 3 children they'd never seen before, had no idea where they came from. I was wondering, would I want to take 2 strange children into my house without knowing anything about them? People in general are basically good and kind. Whatever they hate it because they don't know it or are afraid of it. That's how it is. I'm afraid that's how it is. Nothing seems to have changed.
Violin was made in 1838 in Germany, and it's known now to be the only violin that the family have ever owned. It's never been owned by anyone else. The violin was brought from Russia in 1917 when my grandfather had to flee with the family when the Tsar was arrested. It then took a walk of 1,000 miles, which took a year, arriving in Odessa. Fortunately, the family were then able to come to England. My aunt and my father both played it. My aunt was sent to Germany with the for the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra and played there until Kristallnacht, when she was arrested and sent to Mauthausen. And then she was sent to Auschwitz and finally to Belsen. My father then was given the violin and he played it until his death in 1985. It then fell into disrepair because no one in the family played, and thankfully the repair shop, the BBC programme, restored it, and we were then able to donate it for perpetuity to the Yehuda Menuhin School. It's now being played firstly by a young man who's now studying to be a conductor in Vienna, then by a young lady who's just graduated to the Royal Academy, and now finally Leon, who's half Russian, which I feel is very fitting because the violin is Russian. And now I hope the violin will be played for another 100 years, as the restorer said when it was restored.
And you told some rather harrowing stories about your aunt and how she had to play in the orchestra at Auschwitz.
Yes, the women's orchestra in Auschwitz and Belsen. This was meant to placate the people who were arriving on the trains into thinking they'd come to the resettlement camps, which they'd had to pay for before they boarded the trains. But of course they never were sent to any settlement camps. They were murdered on their arrival, 95% of them. Very few survived.
Your aunt had some interactions with some of the guys that people may have heard of, like Mengele and...
Well, Dr. Mengele was Dr. Death, as they called him. He did several operations on my aunt. Hoss was the camp commandant. and Gressa, she was 18 when originally at Auschwitz, and she was hanged for war crimes, known as the worst female perpetrator of war crimes. What sort of a woman must she have been?
And she took your aunt's violin at one stage?
Yes, well, she took that at the very beginning, but thankfully, I suppose she must have realised that here was a violinist who could play if she had her own instrument, and so she was able to get the violin back.